I just said that already. Let me start that over.
Yep, this is how today's gonna go.
Hello, warriors. Welcome to season 2 of the Invisible Diaries. We're your hosts. I'm Misty.
And I'm Amber, and today we have a great topic to discuss with you.
But first, a quick disclaimer. Any information discussed in this podcast is strictly our opinion and for informational purposes only. It is not meant as medical advice and should not be taken that way. Always consult with your doctor or medical team.
We know battling chronic illness can be hard, and if you find yourself or someone you love in crisis and need someone to talk to, you can call the National Suicide Support Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, which provides free and confidential support in the U.S. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Again, that number is 1-800-273-TALK.
Any cited resources mentioned on this episode will be linked on our website, theinvisibleidiaries.com. Now let's get started.
For this episode, we will discuss mental health, which is a very important topic and a little bit hard to discuss, but I think it's needed.
Absolutely. This is a great topic. Obviously, something that goes hand in hand with dealing with anything in life.
So if there's something we didn't discuss during this episode, feel free to reach out to us at theinvisibleidiaries@gmail.com, or you can visit our website, theinvisibleidiaries.com, and fill out the contact form, as well as Instagram.
Or Facebook.
Because this is, like you said, this is such a broad topic that I'm sure that, I figure this is more like an intro. I'm going to talk about what is anxiety and depression to start, because that's a thing that I feel like a lot of people don't really understand if they haven't experienced it themselves. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I think that with mental health, because for a lot of people it is such a taboo subject, it is one of those things that, for a lot of families is still really difficult to talk about. And it's such, it's such a broad subject. I mean, like you say, anxiety and depression is what you're going to be touching on today. But I mean, there's so much to mental health.
Yes, and I've heard of conversations like in passing and or people are saying, oh, I've gotten nervous before a meeting, so I get anxiety, but that's not anxiety. So I'm going to read something I wrote a while back. So forgive me for reading, because I know we like more of the conversational, but I wanted to share. Anxiety is not being nervous over a big presentation at work. It's not the butterflies in your stomach while you stress over what to wear. It's not the feeling of having a hard time because you have too much on your plate. Anxiety is a wave that towers over you, consuming your entire body. You tremble and shiver, your throat closes up, and your palms sweat. Your heart races like a hummingbird. Many times it can be for no reason at all. It's out of your control. Your body is temporarily not yours. A state of panic sets in and you feel like you might die. Anxiety is neurotransmitters out of balance. It is a feeling of melting into quicksand. It's feeling as if something terrible is about to happen. It feels as if you're about to implode. So that's for anxiety. I got the depression part next, but what do you think?
No, I think that is exactly what it feels like.
Okay, good.
I was just sitting here as my palms were sweating, and I'm like, this is exactly what anxiety feels like. Yeah, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, and so for depression, I'm going to read what I wrote about that too, but I've also heard of people say like, oh, I've been depressed, I lost a game, or lost my job, and you can definitely deal with a bout of depression or being sad, or a breakup. I mean, those things are hard, but there's a difference between going through a difficult time in your life and being down and dealing with it versus having a mental health issue like depression or anxiety. That's something that you've had to deal with your entire life. It's not something that it can be something that has no relation to an event or trauma that you're dealing with at the time. It can just hit you out of the blue.
Well, and I wanted to say too, you had mentioned it with anxiety, dealing with neurotransmitters being out of balance, and that's true with regards to depression as well.
Mm-hmm.
When people go, oh, I'm sad, there's a difference between being sad and actually having a chemical imbalance in your brain,
right,
that you can't muster yourself out of.
Exactly.
Because, with sadness, you can do things to get you out of that rut. You can allow time, things resolve. it's not the way it works with true depression. I mean, true
Absolutely.
depression sometimes needs medicine, sometimes needs a pharmaceutical intervention, sometimes it needs a certain type of therapy.
Right. Depression is not feeling bummed because you had a rough day. It's not feeling sad because things didn't go right today. Depression is not being sad about the mean comments someone made towards you. It's not something that you can just suck up and get over. It's not cured by a simple attitude adjustment. It's just a thick, heavy blanket that suffocates you. Sometimes it is devastatingly painful. Sometimes it is pure numbness, and other times it is a feeling of doom buried deep within you. It is like you are grieving the biggest loss you have ever felt. It feels like you are drowning in darkness. Even when the sun is shining and the sky is blue, this feeling can sink you. Oftentimes there may not even be a reason. It's like you are missing a limb. Something is missing, but you can't place what it is. Anxiety and depression does not make you weak, nor does it mean that you are weak. Mental health disorders are greatly misunderstood by a majority of society. The stigma must end and something needs to change. Generations are losing many to this epidemic. Addiction grows from mental health disorders and the need to self-medicate to escape from suffering.
Wow.
I know, I can get deep and heavy sometimes.
No, honestly, no. I mean, yes, it was deep and it was heavy, but it was beautifully written. So I just want to acknowledge you for that because it was really beautiful. Because these are really hard topics to talk about. From a perspective of dealing with anxiety and depression, but also because we don't make it okay to talk about mental health. I think that there are people that try to glamorize it, and there is nothing glamorous about it. When you truly suffer from these things, it's not fun to be like, yeah, I suffer from depression and don't I get a gold star? I mean, that's not how it feels. It feels like you are out of control of your own life. And
a lot of people hide it. I mean, a lot of people who don't know, you think about like Robin Williams, and you know, we've had a lot of great losses, you know, celebrities, and those were, you know, it can shock people. They don't see it coming sometimes. And that's what's scary about it, is that people don't really talk about it, especially when they're dealing with this. It's like a hidden darkness when you hide it.
Absolutely, which is why we talk about suicide prevention hotline, because it is important to reach out when you're feeling like there is not a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, it's not a place you want to stay without help if you can't get, you know, you can't get yourself out of it. Because a lot of times you can't get yourself out of it, and there's no shame in that. There's no shame in saying like, this is bigger than, because you're not thinking necessarily with a clear mind.
Right.
Especially if it's a chemical imbalance. So, no, I mean, this is beautiful. This needs to go in our book for sure.
Oh, we definitely have a chapter in our book about mental health that we're both going to be collaborating with. And so for those of you who don't know, we are working on a book, and we're hoping for January. So subscribe to our blog so you can stay in the loop.
Yeah, I mean, and talking about depression and anxiety, you know, I just want to touch base on the fact that it is absolutely okay to ask for help. Yes, we throw in the little hotline at the beginning of our episodes because it is important to us, and you know, we want to make sure that people know that there are resources out there. I want to remind people that social media makes it look like everybody's got their life together, but people are battling things. It's just like with our invisible illnesses. This falls in that category because you can put on that face and you can be up and you can muster through and have no idea that
someone's suffering,
someone
is on the inside.
Yeah, and I mean, it took my breath away for a second because it immediately takes me back to those places where it's like,
oh, I wanted to share because, you know, this being like kind of an intro to mental health, because I know we're going to have more of these. So I thought if we kind of discuss what exactly is, you know, the basic foundation of, you know, anxiety, depression, so that maybe even someone who doesn't have that can listen and kind of have an understanding of like what it feels like, because a lot of people who don't understand those are the types of people who think you can just suck it up, you know?
Absolutely. And especially if you're a young person and, you know, you have family that dismisses you because you're young, you're a teenager. We don't always have the tools to assess someone else. We're not professionals. And I just want to remind everybody it's okay to ask for help, because there's so much pressure to look like we have it all together, when in reality, everyone's just doing the best that they can.
So true.
And no one has it together all of the time. I don't care how great the person is that you follow on Instagram looks. I don't care how, you know, wonderful, all those vacation pictures looked on Facebook. I mean, that's not real life all of the time, because no one's on vacation all of the time. No one's up all of the time.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I would like to
on
figure,
Instagram.
if you are on vacation all the time, please share how you're doing that with us.
Exactly.
But the point is that we talk about it's okay to ask for help, because you wouldn't try to build a house if you didn't have all the right tools. And seeking help and asking for help is just adding more tools to your toolbox. You wouldn't try to build a house if all you had is a screwdriver, and you're trying to hammer in a nail with a screwdriver. It's the wrong tool for that.
Yeah.
You would seek out a hammer or a nail gun or whatever it is that you need to be able to do that job properly. And getting help for mental health is the exact same thing.
Yeah, and it's never going to be a one-size-fits-all. Meds might work amazing for someone, and for someone else, they might need to do talk therapy or
combinations of
or maybe
both.
they want to take a spiritual route or change their lifestyle. I mean, it's going to be different for everyone. It might be all of those things for someone. Well, and my husband, I love him to death, but he's never really had experience like a true depression or anything like that. I mean, he's had times in his life that were hard or he was down, but so he doesn't quite get it, and he's learning. So when we were first together, and I mean, we were like engaged, like things were good, and I started seeing my therapist, who diagnosed me with severe major depressive disorder. And for him, he would have that question for me then, as he does with my kids when they're going through depression, who also see therapists. He'll say like, well, why? Like, what do you have to be depressed about? And he said that about, the kids, like, what do they have to be depressed about? Like, they have everything, and they do. But that's not how it works. It's not like you have to have a reason to be depressed.
It's not that you're ungrateful for your great life, and
right?
your brain
Like,
just magically works.
Exactly. Like, I mean, life is good, for the most part. Of course, there's difficult times, and but I mean, we do have everything we need. We have a home, we have a beautiful family, a fun dog, So a lot of people want to ask that type of question, like, but why?
Yeah.
So I wish I knew.
And that's
how
the thing.
It is.
When I glamorize that it's okay to get help, like, I don't want to glamorize the fact that, okay, I have this thing and I'm suffering from it, because there's nothing glamorous about suffering. I mean, there's nothing glamorous about that. But in being able to say, like, yes, I go to therapy, or yes, I take medication, and that helps me function my best, and that helps me show up every day, feeling the best that I can be, and that helps me have the quality of life that I'm trying to have.
Right.
That part I want to glamorize, because that part should be the thing that you can talk about if you want to talk about it,
Yeah.
but not feel ashamed if you don't want to talk about it.
I agree. And everyone's gonna, like we were saying before, everyone's gonna have a different way. So it's like, someone might make a claim that they started drinking a shake and it cured all of that, which is wonderful for that person, but it's not gonna always fit everybody. So it's important to keep that in mind. Like, for me, it was a combination of correcting deficiencies. I found out I have the MTHFR mutation. I corrected that. I also started seeing a therapist, but mainly, like, the most significant thing for me was acknowledging it.
Yeah.
I didn't acknowledge it, so I spent my entire 20s denying it, and that wasn't helpful. And so I didn't do anything to really give myself the opportunity to work on it. Mm-hmm. And up until my 30s, when I finally was like, I have a problem, and it was toxic to relationships, to myself. I mean, my way of thinking, like, I was in a dark place. And so when I finally acknowledged it, I was then open to get the help that I needed, and to kind of dissect things, which can almost be traumatizing in itself, because you have to like relive these horrible moments and kind of figure out, like, why did I make these decisions and why did I behave that way. But
well, and the flip side of that is we always think it has to be worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think even with chronic illness, we do that, where it's like, well, I'm pretty high functioning, like, I am not, like, for me with my POTS, I don't pass out, but
Yeah.
do I still feel awful and have other symptoms? Of course. So in my mind, which we've talked about with imposter syndrome, like, you think it has to be the worst case scenario. And I think mental health is the same thing, where it's like, well, yeah, everything's good in my life, like, there's nothing like there is no major trauma, but for people that understand trauma, people that understand, it doesn't have to be what you may consider major may not be major to me, and vice versa. So I want people to know, especially our young listeners, that no one gets to tell you what's traumatic to you. If you feel it, your feelings are valid.
I love that point, because that's actually something I had to learn on my own, because I've gone through some stuff. Like, I've gone through some things, and there were times in my life where people would be like complaining, or like, I did this minor thing, oh my god, and I would just be like, wow, that must be nice. And so I really had to change my mentality, because I wasn't being like considerate or compassionate, because that was something that was traumatic to that person. Whether to me it might have been nothing, but even the same goes for me. Like, my life might be nothing compared to somebody else. I know somebody has it worse, so it's not a pissing contest.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And I had to kind of learn that myself, that like, okay, this isn't a pissing contest, and this might be traumatic for this person, and they received it in that way.
For you, Misty, is mental health something that's pretty easy for your family to talk about, or was it a taboo topic growing up, do you think?
Well, growing up, mental health was a huge thing. Like, my dad was never diagnosed, but if I had to guess, I would say he definitely was bipolar. Definitely, it runs in my side of the family for sure. We've had losses. So it definitely was present, but it was never acknowledged.
Yeah.
It was never acknowledged. In fact, a lot of my family doesn't really, my outside family, not my
Immediate.
Yeah. They don't really deal with emotions well. So like, even when my dad passed away, like his siblings, like, it was too hard for them to go see him and say their goodbyes. They were just kind of like, okay. They didn't want to acknowledge it because it's too difficult. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because everyone's going to deal with things differently, and I respect that. But just in general, growing up, I always noticed that things were different, but again, it wasn't acknowledged, because it was like, the men, you don't cry about it, or you're
be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just like, the behavior was just kind of dismissed. I mean, my dad was an alcoholic. I mean, I had a really, really rough childhood. He was abusive to my mother, but he was also a great dad. He was an amazing dad. He had a huge heart. So I had like a Jekyll and Hyde version. So with my family, my kids and my husband, it was very important to me to make it a topic that we could discuss. And because I know it can be hard to reach out, I know that like, you can sit in front of someone and just want to scream like, please help me.
Yeah.
But you don't. And so I came up with, for the kids, a code word, peaches. So I pretty much was just like, listen, if you're ever feeling like you're afraid to reach out, but you're going through some stuff and you just want to talk, or you just want to rest your head on my shoulder or whatever, then say peaches. And I'll know like you're dealing with something. And it's actually, it was a good idea. I was like, cool, I don't remember how I came up with it, but like, they've used it and they've utilized it.
I love that.
And I've talked openly about my personal depression, because I had kids at a young age. I was 19. So I definitely had postpartum, and then I had another pregnancies. So I had more postpartum, and plus depression I had before that. I never dealt with it. So I made sure to discuss that once I finally did acknowledge it and make it an open topic.
Well, I think that's difficult when you come from a family that isn't necessarily as vocal. It's hard to know that what you're feeling is something, because I think you tend to not have the confidence. You question yourself. You question that validation, because there's no one there to say like, because it's not something you talk about. So is it normal? Because that's your normal. Your normal is not talking about it. So I think that's important to remember, is that if there is something, because everybody has, unless you're a complete sociopath, most people have that inner voice that says something doesn't feel right, something isn't right. So listen to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't go by just what your family does.
How about you?
Yeah.
Same question to you.
Yeah. Also have mental health for sure in my family, but again, not clearly diagnosed. not until my brother really was forced to deal with his that we started to get some answers. Absolutely, one side talks about it, one side did not. You do the best that you can with the tools that you have. So I looked at my parents as they did the best that they could with the tools that they had, but when I was starting to feel all of these feelings, and again, mine came after I had my son. I had him in my early 20s, and I just remember feeling like I was either feeling anxious or I was feeling like I couldn't get off the couch. There was no like in between. And so for me, it was like, that's a point where I need to get better tools because I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know how to process any of this. So I spent a long time being angry because I felt like I got shortchanged, and that got me nowhere.
Well, I think our parents' generation was so different. I mean, depression wasn't something that they talked about, or mental health.
It was very private. Everybody's life was private. I mean, our generation was I remember in this small town that we lived in for a while growing up, my parents going through a divorce was such a big deal. So much of a big deal. They would there were only 4 of us in the whole elementary school. They would pull us out of class for half the day. We were in like the special support group, which was worse because, you know, your classmates are like, where do you go all day? So then you're kind of forced to talk about it, you know, but again, it was a generation that
So I feel like our generation is trying to make it less of a taboo topic because we're seeing this epidemic stem from it. I mean, with addiction and mental health
and trying to deal with it on your own when if you don't have the tools, it's impossible to do. Not long term.
It should be a topic that should be discussed regularly and introduced to your family or your relationships, you know, because I mean, even if in past relationships, it's like that I don't know.
No, for sure. I mean, like, we teach sexual education in school. Why would we not talk about mental health? I mean, anxiety and depression are all part of life. It's all part of being human. Any more than, you know, people that might get cancer or might get an autoimmune disease. Well, and it's interesting that you have a code word with your kids, because my son and I, since he was small, like, you know, growing up in a family that was pretty dysfunctional myself, that I was really careful to make sure that we were always verbalizing, we were always talking about things, probably to a point now where he's like so comfortable, he's like, I don't want to talk about it. Because I would always say, like, you know, jokingly, I would say, I'm just going to add money to your therapy jar because I know at some point you're going to need therapy. And so we've had the conversation, and we've normalized it in our house that he knows he's gone with me to my appointments, you know. So then you wonder, like, will your kids be the same way?
Right.
Or will it go back to being like...
Well, hopefully, like breaking the cycle. I mean, someone's got to break the cycle so that the next generations can have a better life or better understanding or better ways to cope. I mean, life's hard.
And you're entitled to privacy. I mean, I'm a really private person as well, but I also like to be able to talk about things that make me feel like I'm not the only one. It's nice to be able to look at someone and go, oh, you too? Like, okay, you know, even with your son, like, I'm not the only one that feels like the weight of the world is crushing me and that I'm supposed to have my whole life figured out right now, and I don't. And
teenagers, you know, like, their depression, anxiety is just as real. They might not have to stress about keeping a roof over their head or you know, these big things, but they're dealing with hormones and becoming their own individual person. And
your frontal lobe's not even fully developed till your early 20s anyway, so it's like everyone always jokes about teenagers being like, I love you, I hate you, but that is genuinely how their brain is wired until they grow.
For me, I think the reason why I'm that way with my kids is because when I was a teen, my depression was real. It was real heavy, and it was very scary and very serious, and it was never addressed or acknowledged because I kept it hidden. And, you know, luckily I'm here to share that, but I mean, nobody necessarily knew about it, so I wanted to make sure, like, because I understand being a teen and feeling that way, and I want to make sure that the kids know, you know, that they can talk about it. So I'm lucky to have that perspective to be able to try to open that, whereas not all parents are going to have that same perspective because they might not have suffered from depression whenever they were younger, so they might not realize that their kid possibly could.
If you are a young person and your parent is like, we don't talk about that, that's not, you're fine, don't always assume it's because they don't care. A lot of times adults
They just
are dealing
don't
with their
realize
own things.
it.
Yeah, they don't deal with it themselves, and so then it perpetuates more of a we don't talk about it. We don't deal with it. That's not what we do. Like, just keep moving forward. Well, speaking of parents that kind of push through it, what about toxic positivity?
I'm like obsessed with this topic because for me it's something I really want to just get out there and just to have people maybe open up their minds and change their perspective a little bit. So, we are so wrapped up in a world of staying positive that we're ashamed to actually feel anything else. So with that being said, toxic positivity is a thing. We were raised to suck it up and smile, so wrapped up in a world of staying positive that we are actually ashamed to feel anything else because people only want good vibes, but that's not realistic. We're going to have other feelings besides joy, happiness, excitement. It's okay to feel jealous and upset and disappointed and angry. That's just part of life.
You say, you talk about toxic positivity, and I'm like, what about just toxicity in general? When you say good vibes only, I don't want your negative energy, there's a difference between healthy negative emotion and someone who's truly toxic.
Exactly. We're raised to suck it up and smile, but I prefer my friends and family to be genuine. I want to know about your bad day. We all have those. I don't want you to fake anything for me or anyone else. We need to break the stigma of bottling things up and being on autopilot with responses like, I'm fine, and you? Mental health is an epidemic because we all participate in hiding and making everyone feel alone, and I think it's time for a change. I think people will open up more if we don't push that toxic positivity by making people feel afraid to talk about the negative aspects of life.
100%. We say it a lot. If you guys ever read our descriptions on Instagram about holding space, because we want people to know, it's like if you imagine a circle and you leave a spot for someone to come sit, you're not making them participate or talk or they only can show up a certain way. It's just saying, hey, come as you are, however you are, wherever you're at in your journey, and you're allowed to be here. You don't have to only be this one specific way, which I feel like toxic positivity does, because it's like,
right,
only if you're happy, only if your life is all together, only if, which is crazy to me.
So, and that's why I feel like people bottle things up and we don't realize that someone was depressed, deep down secretly. They're afraid to open up because we're not allowing them to. So if you want to see a change in this epidemic or be part of the change, then don't be that person who doesn't allow others to open up by shoving the toxic positive things, like the positive vibes, only down everyone's throat. Be that person who says, hey, if you're not having a positive day, I'm here for you.
Thank you so much for listening and for being a part of the Invisible Diaries community.
As always, we ask that you leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you are listening to. That helps others to find us as well. Make sure you're following us on Instagram and Facebook for the latest updates, and subscribe to our website, theinvisibleidiaries.com, where you'll find all the details from today's podcast as well as other amazing resources. You can also check out our digital magazine.